I would say yes to a website, absolutely. It's a good shop window, and it's a chance for you to market yourself however you want to. Make sure it's slick, make sure it's beautifully written, and all of that. I would say in terms of other in other sources of online visibility, there is a difference between being on a portal. Again, it's very good for SEO and your Google rankings, but there's a difference between that and having a listing in a professional association. It gives you an extra quality stamp, and I think that's an important distinction to make.
Yeah, just to agree with what Jessica was saying, it is, I found having a website is quite a nice way to introduce yourself in a more personal way that you can't really do when you're sending off your CV to a client or an agency. When I was a project manager, it feels like a better relationship when you see that someone you're dealing with quite frequently has a website. You can see, it's not really stalking, but you can kind of see what they're doing. You see that they're legitimate in what they do. They might have a blog. They might just, like I do, I keep a relatively updated list of summary of recent projects, just so people looking at my CV, they might have a look at the website and say, okay, this is what he's doing. And when I was a project manager, I did value a personal relationship with a lot of translators, some of whom I'm still in contact with now. So it's a great way of getting in with agencies or other clients and developing that relationship so that they think of you when they need something done.
Do you have multilingual pages on your website?
I don't yet.
Yeah. Not yet, but I'm working on it.
You say you do, Jessica. Which languages?
Yes, I have.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, I have Italian, of course. I'm Italian. And then I have English and Spanish. And I've translated them with the help of native speakers, of course. An English native speaker and Spanish native speakers. But yeah, it took me a while, but it was worth, because obviously some of my clients are English. They need translation into Italian. Some of them are Spanish. And of course, if they can read about me in their own language, that is better.
My name's Christina. I'm considering translation as a career. I had a question specifically for Tom. You mentioned that you specialise in medical translations, but you studied languages at university. So how did you get that specialism?
Essentially I've been specialising as I've gone, kind of learning on the job, so to speak. I'd say it's still the case that the majority of people going into translation come from a languages background, as opposed to working in industry or, say, I guess the big three are kind of legal, financial, and medical. Most people's translators still come from a linguistic background first. So I've been partly through CPD workshops with professional associations, both with Chartered Institute of Linguists, and I'm also a member of the ITI Medical Network. I've gone through a mentoring program with them. I'm currently doing a course on medical terminology, and I guess it's a way of starting slow, starting small, starting more general, and then working your way into more technical aspects as you go. I've found that asking other translators for help is very useful. Because I think translators are really keen on helping each other. I think it's I guess partly because we're quite isolated as freelancers, often working from home. It's a way of building up your own social network, really, of peer-to-peer aid. And yeah, I'm still specialising. But I'm at the stage where I feel confident what I can do and what I can't do. You shouldn't be afraid of telling, if you really can't do something, you look at it and you think it's horrid, you shouldn't be afraid to say no thanks. It's always a bad idea to bite off more than you can chew. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't push yourself and try to take a challenge if you think you can do it.
Can I add something? I specialize in medical as well, and I did a master's in translation. So I asked my supervisor and I said, how can I specialize in medical translation? Because we were doing all sorts of different documents at university. And she said, well, if you want to specialize in medical, then in the practical course, you just choose your text and I'll give you some text to translate, some medical text. Obviously, those translations are in my portfolio, so even if it was university work, you can still use it as your portfolio and show that you've done that translation in that specific field. And also I've done a lot of courses in medical translation, but also courses in biology, so to show clients that I have the knowledge. So I did courses in biology, courses in cancer science, courses in medicine. Obviously, they were all general courses, or not too specialized, but it's a good way to start learning a new field, especially when you have a language background. And also it's a good way to show that you are committed and you know what you're doing, especially to agencies and clients. I also done a certificate, it's called GCP, which is a good clinical practice. And usually doctors and nurses have to do that certificate, but I decided to do it myself. So it's a good way to show, that you are willing to learn medicine and medical documents, and you have the knowledge to do translation in medical documents, yeah. So I think it's good to have medical translation courses, but as well as some other things like biology or medicine if you want to specialize in medical translation.
Just to add to that, there are master's programs that do. I think Imperial does one.
UCL.
In London.
Medical and scientific translation, and then there are others that do, particularly for legal as well. On the subject of medical and scientific in particular, the internet is full of excellent resources and reliable resources as well. I have my own paper dictionaries, which sent me back quite a lot. A small one, about A5, costs about £80 for bilingual French-English. But there are resources absolutely everywhere, and reliable ones too. Courses in ranging from the very general anatomy all the way down into medical statistics, oncology, and absolutely
I've
anything.
used a lot. It's called FutureLearn. It's an online website that you can just sign up and just follow a course online. You don't have to pay for it, and you just watch it at home. It's like videos. That was a good way to start.
Okay, thanks. So that touches on the idea of training and continuing professional development. I mean, big areas for translators.
So I noticed that most of you had an in-house job position before going freelance. And I would like to ask, as a young graduate, what kind of jobs do we need to keep an eye for before stepping into the freelancing position? Because I understand that in-house translation jobs are not many. And what's the position that we need to look for when we graduate in order to build a network, a good reputation, and gain the essential skills?
I'll go. There's a lot to be said for working in the field you want to specialise in. So I don't know what you're focusing on, but going out and working in that industry and coming back to translation once you've acquired all that knowledge, that's another way of getting a specialism, and working either in your source or target culture. Other than that, my first job was so it's a marketing company, but it has a translation department, so I worked in a linguistic role, but I think there's nothing like getting in-field experience.
Yeah, Catherine.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I don't have any experience working for a translation company, but I mean, yes, I guess working in a law firm is similar, and doing translations in a law firm is similar to working for a translation company, in that you don't have to think about looking for clients, you don't have to think about doing all the other sort of periphery tasks that freelancers have to deal with.
If you want to work in-house, you don't just have to pursue specifically in-house translation positions. You could consider a project manager role or a proofreader role, because both of those positions are still highly relevant to translation. Working as a PM, that will obviously teach you a lot about the practicalities of the industry and will really prepare you for when you go freelance. And starting off as a proofreader, also that's a stepping stone to becoming a translator. And I know many people who started off as a proofreader or a PM who've then sidestepped into a translation role, either within the same company or at another company, because they've now got that sort of initial experience. So you could still work within the translation industry in-house, but not necessarily starting off as an in-house translator.
Yeah, just to add to that, I was at the panel leaders discussion this morning, and they were talking about internships and things like that, and none of them mentioned any roles as in-house translators. They're all in project management, vendor management, marketing, business development, all that type of thing. That said, I learned so much as a project manager. I would, if you're going to go into project management, I'd probably recommend a smaller agency over a larger agency, because you're probably going to be given a wider remit. You're going to have more input into the business. You're going to be trusted more with doing different tasks and different roles, like I was. And yeah, it helps you build. I think it helps you build more of a relationship with both people in your agency and the translators and proofreaders you work with, and you get a really wide view of the industry, how it works, what to look at. If you work recruiting translators, you get to know what people want from translators, so that when you leave, you know what you need to get, or start preparing for that before. I mean, I finished the CIOL Diploma in Translation this year, but I'd actually started it while I was still project managing. So I took one exam the year before I left, and then I took the final exam this year. So that way, when I left, I'd already said, I could already put my CV working towards it, already have one exam under my belt and continuing on. Yeah, I'm rambling a bit now.
Okay, thanks. And the next question.
Hi, yeah, actually the previous girl more or less asked my question. It was just about the in-house jobs, and if you could give any tips on how to actually find in-house companies offering in-house jobs, whether there's any way of knowing which companies are likely to have those, because of course they are so rare, and especially depending on your language combination. So if you could give any help with that.
Yeah, Lloyd?
There's a company on the exhibition hall downstairs called Multilingual Vacancies. If you register with them, they have vacancies crop up from time to time with in-house translation companies. There's also an association called the Association of Translation Companies, all translation companies in the UK. If you go onto their website, they've got a list of all their members, essentially all the translation companies registered with them in the UK. Not all of them will employ in-house translators, so you will have to sort of try and find that out for yourself, but that should give you a starting point of, you know, who's out there, what translation companies are there in this country. Also, if you're still studying, your careers department as well might have relationships with certain translation companies, so it's worth asking with them as well.
Helen?
I also think, am I right in saying the ITI post jobs online? And I think the CIOL does as well, so they're always they're always good places to go to.
Hi there. One of the barriers, I suppose, for young people or people starting out in translation is lack of experience. And I've seen a lot of job ads and things where they say minimum 2 years experience or 3 years experience. I just wondered if you could talk a bit about how you present your experience in terms of on your CV, especially if it's bitty freelance jobs here and there, or if you include your university experience, and how you kind of, not just how you get it, but how you present it. And when they say 2 years, does that mean like 2 years full time, or what does it mean?
So when I first started, I was very lucky. When I first started as a freelancer, I was very lucky that my old employer was my first client, and they actually gave me a sort of a set chunk every week of work, which was nice. So I was able to build up experience with that. But I did use as part of my master's, I did a project, an extended translation, and I did use that as a portfolio piece when I first got started. And I did a few voluntary pieces of translation as well, and then just built them up into a portfolio. And I'd already had some in-house experience, so I quickly built up 2 years. But your experience doesn't have to be paid. It has to be very good. What you produce has to be very good, but it could be pro bono, or it could be even things that you've produced at university, and you can include those. The important thing is to be honest. You can't pretend you have 10 years experience, you've only got 2, but as long as you're straight with the client, I think that's fine.
As she said, I've also used my dissertation as my portfolio because I did an extended translation project. Well, before doing my dissertation, I decided I wanted to start working as a translator, and that was how to start doing actual work. And you can use your dissertation as your portfolio if it's a translation project. And also I did some volunteering jobs as well.
I do agree that experience and prerequisite experience is a problem in the industry, particularly with, agencies that are considered more reputable because of maybe ISO standards or other standards they have to adhere to. They have to have it written that they only take people with minimum 3, minimum 5 years experience, etc. The way I did it was I took a lot of work when I first started out at lower pay rates that I would never charge now, but I used it as an opportunity to get the experience. It wasn't just money to put in the bank. It was money. It was to show that I've been working in translation. And I mean, project management is translation experience. So when I left project management, I'd say on my CV, I have 2.5 years experience in translation. I mean, and it's quite clear from my CV that 2 of those years were in project management, but that still means that I am experienced in translation. I know what's involved, I know what you have to do. I've done pro bono work with Translators Without Borders. I think that was one of the first things I did when I left was sign up with them, take their test, because you have to do a test to get on there. They're well known throughout the world, particularly with agencies. So if they know, and I've got a little icon on my website that updates whenever I do a project for them. So I think at the moment I've got 20,000 words or so translated with them. And that just shows that you are doing regular translation. I also, as I said earlier, I was kind of doing my DipTrans on the side, and when I did one of the exams, I managed to find the text online that I'd taken for the exam, and once I found out that I'd passed, I said that I passed it and I put up a link to the text so they could see the type of text that I've done in an exam situation and done well in. So it's, again, it's a lot of it is how you say it. It's showing that you are experienced without saying that, okay, I spent 5 years translating.
Yeah, 2.5 years in translation. Clever use of words.
Yeah.
But that's what translation's all about.
Exactly.
So you were just demonstrating that.
As the other panelists said, the most important thing is that you have some sort of portfolio on your CV in whatever form it takes. When I applied for my in-house job, and I was still in the last year of my undergraduate language degree, all I had on my CV in terms of translation experience was what I'd done on my language degree. And the voluntary translation I did, those poems that I was talking about, only did a translation of 12 very short German into English poems. So only those 2 items of experience. And that experience on my university course was only part of a language degree. So if you do a master's in translation, think about all the experience that gives you. But there's also other channels of experience that you could pursue. In terms of voluntary translation, you could approach organizations, local or national, arts organizations in particular. Some tend to work with people around the world and therefore have translation requirements. I know some people, when they started out in translation, there's a multilingual news website called Cafe Babel, which publishes news articles in a variety of languages and has volunteers translate them. So that's a really good way to get started. Cafe Babel, that website is called. So they'll publish articles in German, French, and you'll translate them into English. But there's lots of other language combinations too. It's also, even if you're still a student, it's worth considering joining a professional organisation, either the ITI or CIOL. ITI in particular has student membership, and joining that early on in your career will give you access to the professional network out there, but also if you're applying for in-house jobs, membership of ITI so early on in your career is going to look fantastic, I think, and employers will really value that.
Sam Saleh. I was born to an English mother and Egyptian father, and since then I've been speaking both Arabic and English, obviously, all the time, and I worked for several national and international companies. But now I'm wondering, how can I get the companies who are working in their field, but they don't deal with the Middle East, basically because they don't know the language. So they just go on to other areas. How can one find that out?
So you're looking to find out companies that work in your language, but they don't know that language?
No.
Sorry, I misunderstood.
Companies that are not taking notice of the Arabic language because they don't have anybody, and they are busy with their own business with other companies. But in the future, maybe they would like to get to make work with the Middle East.
Okay.
And that's where I would step in.
Okay, well, let's put that over to the panel. Does anybody have any ideas on that?
You can't sell to people who don't want to buy, unfortunately. But you could target them at trade fairs. I don't know which areas you work in, but go and meet them and just see if there is people. Go and meet, by them I mean people in that industry, and see if there is any interest. And it involves doing an awful lot of market research to see where the opportunities for translation are. I'm afraid I don't know anything about the Middle East because it's not an area I work with, but I think it just comes down to a lot of market research and finding your clients.
As Helen said, it would be up to yourself to invest a lot of time in finding out what companies what companies in the UK perhaps want to expand into the Arabic-speaking world. I know there's a government organisation called UKTI, UK Trade and Investment, who help businesses in the UK go into different markets. So let's say you've got a business in the UK who wants to go into Egypt. UKTI will then help that business launch in Egypt. And they also work with translators in order to translate everything they need into Arabic in this example. So that's they're called UKTI, so they're really helpful. Yeah. They'd be on the exhibition floor, wouldn't they? So you could have a chat with someone from them. And that applies to translators working from English into another language, because they work with companies expanding all over the world.
My name's Rahana, and I'm currently studying a degree in translation. And I wanted to know When did you make the decision about the specialisation you wanted to go into, and how did you make that decision? And if you think it's important for students to make it earlier on in their degree?
I made my decision probably while I was project managing. So when I entered the translation industry, I didn't have a specialisation and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I think through project management, looking at different texts that came in, different projects that were ongoing, I got a bit of a feeling about what I didn't like, which was legal, marketing, finance found quite boring. And then, different things came up, scientific things I found quite interesting. Had a bit of a science background at school, but not since then. And then there's also market research in terms of the translation industry, what things are, what fields are, where there's a lot of translation. There's medical translation all over the world, legal, financial, those are and business and marketing, those are the main ones. But at the same time, if there's anything that you're particularly interested in, any particular field that you like, academic fields or things like that can also help to push you into a specialisation. It's always good to do something you enjoy, which is why, I mean, it wasn't that much of a flippant remark when I said I didn't like financial, because if you are going to be working for it and you need to promote yourself and work very hard, particularly at the start, just to get your feet off the ground, you need to be doing it in something that you enjoy and you think you can learn from. What I like a lot about medical is that it gives the opportunity for continual learning. I mean, I don't think in 30 years' time, I'm sure I won't know half as much as any kind of specialised doctor, but I'll still be learning every single day, doing different projects.
I would say get a specialism as soon as you can. And if you're still studying, I don't know whether there's any opportunity to study modules in that particular field and then maybe go and do an internship in your source language country in that area. You can never load too much, and it's your specialism along with your writing skills are your real selling points. The aim ultimately would be to blend in with people in their industry and they won't know you're a translator. They'll just think you're one of them. So start as early as you can, get some formal training, work experience would be brilliant, and yes, make a decision as soon as you can.
You can start quite early, even when you're still studying, to specialise, because there are some really good online translator training providers. One I can think of is called ECPD Webinars, and they're called Alexandria Project, and they offer a really wide array of specialist webinars specifically for translators and interpreters, and they're quite good value as well. I think they start about £25 each. And again, if that's on your CV, even when you're a student, that's going to look fantastic, I think. But that's the way you could start specialising right now.
And don't forget MOOCs, is it massive online open courses, or the O's maybe the other way around. But most are free, I think some are paid for. There's an app for a Coursera app, and their courses run by universities all around the world in different languages. Taught by specialists, and it's another avenue you can explore.
So follow your interests, and it's never too early to specialise. There's a lady in the front row here.
Hi, my name is Kasia, and I've nearly qualified as a translator. I've just submitted my master's dissertation in translation studies. So now I've got a question. I actually have two questions. One question a little bit negative, because as a starting translator, of course, it's hard to get jobs, so we've been talking about that. But I also wanted to ask you about the payment, the financial side of it, because I've got translator friends, and I've got experience with interpreting agencies. And I just wanted to ask you, what is the accepted in terms of receiving payments from clients, either agencies or private clients? Because, for example, in my experience, some interpreting agencies, there could be 2 months late with the payment, 3 months late with the payment. What is the tolerance threshold, would you say? And how would you deal with sort of problems? Because obviously you want to retain your clients and you want to maintain good rapport with the agencies as well, because they are future source of work. How would you balance sort of if payments are late, coming in late, but at the end you need the payments to pay your rent and so on? How would you deal with these situations? What would be what do you think the threshold for the lateness in terms of payment is? And
Fortunately, I've not had any major problems, but I've spoken to colleagues who do. A reasonable payment term, so when you invoice to the time the client has to pay, would be 30 days. Some translators might be well within their rights to pursue late payment on day one that it's overdue. Myself, I would allow a maximum of another 30 days. If you do have major problems in obtaining payment from a client, there is legislation in your favour. You can start applying interest onto that invoice, and you could contact debt collection agencies. But that we are really talking about extreme cases here. And once that happens with one of my clients, I don't work with them again. Especially if it's sort of the first payment. If it's a regular client I have who's paid well, leading up to that, and then suddenly there's quite a late payment, I might give them the benefit of the doubt once, but if it seems to be a recurring pattern, you don't work with them again.
As I work as a freelancer, I'm a business, so I set my own payment terms, and I fulfill my end of the bargain by delivering a good job. I expect the client to pay on time. I'm not as patient as Lloyd. I give them a call if it's a few days late. I send a reminder. And I have always been paid so far and will hopefully always be, touch wood. But it's a business transaction. It's not acceptable to pay late. It's not acceptable to deliver a job late, and it's not acceptable to be paid late. And if you can't rely on these clients to pay you on time, I would get some new clients.
I think you need to be strict with them from the outset when you're negotiating with them before you even take on any jobs. You need to say, this is my payment term. If you don't pay by this deadline, I will take action, without sort of frightening them off, but just to make it clear.
would you say the same about the agencies as well? Because there is the whole array of agencies out there. Would you be strict with the agencies as well, or?
Absolutely, I wouldn't differentiate between clients.
I had a question that I wanted to put. Sorry, I'm interjecting. It's about the idea of mentoring, which I don't think has really come up, but I was hoping would come up. The idea of mentoring. Now, I know in the EU institutions we have a system of mentors. When you join, you're assigned a more experienced translator. The idea is that the older translators give some help to the new. Well, I joined the EU institutions quite late in my career. I was already beyond young when I joined, and the mentor that I was assigned was younger than me. So it was, but he still taught me an awful lot. Catherine, does that scheme still exist? Do you have a mentor? How has that worked? And then perhaps the panel, how do you find mentoring? How do you contact more experienced translators and get them to give you advice, other than coming to places like the London Language Show?
Yes, that scheme absolutely does still exist, certainly in the council where I work. I was assigned a mentor within the department, within the English translation unit, who I was able to go to with any sort of work-based questions, like if I had any questions on the procedure for translating documents, how to use SDL Studios, for example, anything like that. And I think I had a similar experience to Paul in that my mentor was probably considerably younger than I am as well. Right. I also have a mentor outside of the department who I'm able to ask things like, I don't know, where the where's the canteen, or where are the best bars in Brussels, things like that. So that was actually really helpful when I first arrived.
Okay.
I had a mentor when I joined the ITI Medical Network. I think it's only quite a recent thing that they've started up. And I was paired with a translator who has a good 25, 30 years experience in medical translation, and that was with French to English. The way it was structured was that we had an initial conversation, find out what I'm interested in, what I'm trying to specialise in, what my background is, what my strengths, weaknesses, etc. Particularly for me, I was looking to be more confident writing medical text, in that I was kind of at the point where I knew what I was doing was correct, whether it was adequate and acceptable for a medical professional to read is a slightly different thing. We had, over the space of about 5 or 6 months, 3 texts, which I would translate, she would proofread, give me more information, have a little email exchange about what I found hard, easy, and ways that she thought I could improve. And I found it a really enriching experience. And particularly with the lack of in-house training going on at the moment, I think it should play a bigger role. Although the logistics of doing it is quite tricky. It's almost always going to be distance-based, particularly as people work in home offices. Getting enough, that there's always going to be more demand than supply. I think so more mentees and mentors. And it's got to be, there has to be there has to be enough of a will from the profession to want to help the younger generation, which recently I've seen a lot more of. When I first went freelance, you kind of feel like you are on your own, because you go from working in an office to working at home, or working in a cafe or a pub, which I do sometimes. So it's quite hard to get to know people like that who, and I think people are very ready to offer their experience and wisdom, but there aren't that many outlets to do so, which is why joining Chartered Institute of Linguists and getting more involved with it has actually enabled me to make contact with a lot of people who can see that you're young, interested, that they're ready to offer you help. I've had a couple of people pass me jobs before, got my first direct client through another translator as well.
As young people in translation, what are you doing differently, do you think, to, say, the previous generation? How are you breaking the rules?
We're thinking more like business people.
We're using, social media is about now, which we are using, but we use it in a professional capacity. It's a way to build relationships with colleagues in a completely different way to previous generations would have ever been able to, and potentially developing client relationships like that.
Translation technologies, so we use a lot of new translation tools which will help you gain work, basically. Yeah.
I think with the technology we're a lot more mobile and a lot more flexible.
I'd have to agree with Jessica and Tom and say the technology that's available now to assist translators, I think that's the main difference. Yeah.
I'd like to thank our panel, and we've got Lloyd, Jessica, Helen, Tom and Catherine, so thanks to them. Thanks to you for coming. Thanks to our co-organisers, the CIOL and the ITI, Anne, Jack, Karen and Jane. Enjoy the rest of the show. Thanks a lot.